pretend audience. You are so kind. Thank you so much. Alrighty, friends, welcome into Talking Sports at Work, Monday edition. Today is, what is today? The 7th? No, that's the ninth. The ninth. Today is Monday, December the ninth, and man, December is moving way too quickly for me. We got a lot to fit in here. I've got a lot more Christmas movies on our list. I feel like we've just now started kind of breaking into the Christmas music, and this time of year always goes by way too quickly. But this year it seems like it's really, really flying by. But that's been a trend lately, just in general, man. This whole year seems to have flown by, and I do not like that. I do not, I love my children and I'm proud of them and all of their accomplishments as they get older, but it also sucks. I do not like them getting older. I do not like myself getting older. Yeah. Wow. I'm not meaning to start this off on such a negative note. Wow. I apologize for that. But yeah, anyway, the point was it just seems like December is moving by really, really quickly. And I love this. This is my favorite time of year. So instead of dwelling on that, I am going to dwell on the fact that it is December. It is my favorite time of year. I'm just going to try to be present and enjoy it. And I'm not good at that. I've always struggled with living in the moment, but that's what I'm going to try to do. That'll be my goal for today. That'll be one of my goals for this month, if I can try to remember, just to, which it always is, but yeah, just try to appreciate the now, live in the moment. And there are lots of things to appreciate if you are a Tennessee Vols football fan. And we got a lot to talk about with that. A lot to talk about with the conference championship results. A lot to talk about with the NFL results. The Titans laid another egg, and I'm telling you, Brian Callahan might be in trouble. And I've got a lot to talk about with that. I haven't covered the Titans very much lately, just because there hasn't been that much to talk about. I don't want to just focus on all the negatives, and they've been the same negatives pretty much all year. They except for Will Levis, who really did turn a corner and has been significantly better since he got benched. All the same problems are still lingering. But we're going to dive into that. We will dive into other NFL results and the playoff picture that is shaping up, as well as the playoff picture in college football, which is now clear. And yeah, a lot to talk about. I'm going to take a quick break and see what all I've got on my notes for today, and I'll pull over and do that. And again, I've kind of quit doing my little disclaimer, but for anyone new, anytime I'm looking at notes or stats or schedules or whatever, I'm pausing and pulling over to do that because, the premise of this show is I am doing a podcast while I'm driving to my route. And it's all obviously hands free. And anytime I do anything with my phone, I'm pulling over. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Take a quick break. I will be right back. Alrighty, friends. So first things first, I hope you guys listened to the betting episode on Friday, and I hope you took some of my advice. I wasn't very confident in any of the NFL games, and I said that. It just that was not a good slate of games for at least personally for me to bet on, and so I did not. I didn't do much on Sunday, but God, I did on Saturday. Boy, that was a good day. The one that I'm pretty sure I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm pretty sure I told you guys exactly how I was feeling because I also told my friends and family. There are there's one I'm super confident in, and there's one I'm pretty very confident in, and then the rest, we'll see. But I knew Oregon. I actually thought Oregon was going to beat Penn State by double digits. I was impressed by Penn State. I'll say that. But obviously, Oregon did cover, and that went really well. The other one was Georgia. Georgia had already beaten Texas this year in their own building. This was going to be on a sort of neutral site, but in Atlanta, basically Georgia's home turf. And Georgia's been there so many times before, and it just there was. I did not understand how Texas was the favorite in this game, but Texas played really, really well for the most part. It went into overtime, and boy, the way that one ended was really cool too. Carson Beck goes down at the end of the first half, and then Gunner comes in, and you don't. I was kind of worried and excited at the same time because, a lot of people think Carson Beck's the problem with this team. I'm not one of those people, but he has been crazy inconsistent. And Gunnar Stockton could, I was thinking maybe he'll bring a little spark to the offense. We'll see. And that's exactly what happened. He brought a spark to the offense, and the offense came alive in the second half. And then the way that one ended with him taking God, that was depending on how you look at it, either the best or the worst hit of the college football season. I mean, that one was a God. He took that huge hit, which set them up inside the five, and then Carson Beck comes in for the final play of the SEC championship. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I had a lot on Georgia. I had a lot on Oregon, and then I had a lot on parlays with the two of them. So I ended up making more, just on Saturday than I do working in a week. And those are the best weekends. I love when that happens. So yeah, and then the one that I was wrong about, because the one I did lose on was I had a parlay that was Oregon and Georgia and SMU. And I said, even I'm sure on the episode last week, that I'm not super confident, but it just feels like Clemson has been coming up short in big games for the last several years now. SMU is a good team. Clemson is more talented, but there's no reason to believe in them. Um, so yeah, I had if SMU would have won and pulled that one off, I would have won $300 more than I even ended up with. So, that was disappointing, but whatever. But I'm sure it was even more disappointing for a particular fan base out there, because that means Alabama's out. And I think we all knew it. The discussions came on the next day they did the playoff reveal, and they had to have the discussions. Paul Feinbaum had to come on and toot the SEC horn, and Nick Saban sort of did the same, but for Alabama, obviously. But in the end, there really wasn't even there wasn't that much to debate. You know, you can't. If SMU had gotten blown out like they did in the first half, if it continued that way, then Alabama very well might have made it in. But SMU came roaring back in the second half. I thought they were going to win that one at the end, but then they screwed up and gave up that big kickoff return, and then a big chunk play after that. Clemson hits a 50 whatever yard field goal, and that's how they win. So SMU had to be in. You can't take them out for making the conference championship, playing an extra game and losing like that. That would have just set the worst precedent, and everybody knew it. And it's funny, the same guys who had been saying that all year long were now some of the guys who were talking about, oh, strength of schedule should matter more, and look who Alabama's beat. Well, look who Alabama lost to as well. Alabama has three good wins, I think. Obviously, Georgia. I can't remember who else, but they've got good wins. They were like 3-1 against current top 25 teams. South Carolina was one. Um, but look who they lost to. They've only got one good loss. That was to us. Tennessee beat Alabama. Vanderbilt beat Alabama, and Oklahoma destroyed Alabama in a time of the season where everything's on the line and everything's in front of Alabama. So, they have no one to blame but themselves, obviously. Um, and then not to mention the fact that Tennessee beat Alabama, and Tennessee beat both of the other two teams that beat Alabama. Um, that's something that I feel like has not been talked about enough. But anyway, I'm not here to beat up on Alabama or South Carolina or Ole Miss. Although, oh, poor Lane Kiffin. Um, but anyway, it's still going to be a discussion. Does SMU have a better chance of winning the national championship this year than Alabama would have? No, probably not. We know what Alabama's ceiling. Alabama's ceiling is higher than SMU. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so, that became part of the argument. And, yeah, but anyway, you could not, after SMU lost by a last second field goal in the ACC championship, you could not knock them out of the playoffs. So I think once that happened, the way that game ended, the picture became pretty clear for how things were going to go. And this is really the only way it could have gone. Now, the seeding and the order. There's one that I have a problem with, and we're going to discuss it, but I'm not surprised by it. I was not surprised at all that they put or kept Ohio State ahead of us. I'm not going to be all up in arms about it. But that's one that I think should have been different. Other than that, I think everything was correct. And I even called it 100% correct. Which again, it wasn't hard to do, but I know Heather Dinich actually, with her prediction, surprisingly had Penn State ahead of Texas, and I said, no, that doesn't make sense. And the committee got it right. They had Texas there at 5, Penn State at 6, um, and then who was at 7? Notre Dame, I guess, and then Ohio State, us, and Indiana. Who else? Who was at 11? SMU, and then and Clemson, the ACC champion, ends up being that final seed. And so that there was really not even that much to debate. It felt like now there is as far as the teams in. I can understand the argument. I get it, but it really came down to for me, I kept hearing all these people talking about who Alabama's beaten, and I was like, okay, that no one can argue with that, but you also have to factor in who they lost to. And that's why I thought Miami should have actually been ahead of Alabama. I was surprised when the rankings were that way. I thought Miami deserved to be ahead of Alabama. I mean, Miami's two losses were, I think, both by within one score, and they were both to good teams. Not elite teams, but teams that are decent. Syracuse is probably ranked right now. Georgia Tech is, I think. I mean, so, you can look and talk about the wins, but you also got to factor in the losses. And so that's why this is just such a difficult thing. Um, but anyway, I'm going to take one more quick break. We'll dive into the most important matchup to me, and that's Tennessee and Ohio State, because we got plenty of time to talk about that one, but we're going to dive on in today. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. So, Tennessee is going to have to go to the frozen tundra of Columbus from the way everybody's friggin' talking about it, you would think. Um, and that's something that just makes me laugh. I've been saying it since this whole thing became a topic. It also made Josh Heupel laugh whenever they were talking about it on the playoff reveal show. It's like I don't know if you guys have ever, I know that a lot of those guys on TV have spent time in East Tennessee before because they've been to Knoxville to cover games. So we're not talking about Gainesville or Tuscaloosa here. It gets cold in the East Tennessee mountains. Um, and I actually heard him talking about it on the radio today on the SEC network, and he was saying that it's actually colder right now in Knoxville than it is in Columbus. So this is not a big difference for us. This is not really a difference for us. The whole weather discussion just should be thrown out the window. There's the difference between weather in Columbus and weather in Knoxville this time of year is negligible. I mean, that's a silly conversation. Now I know it was more relevant when it looked like South Carolina and Alabama might be getting in, but with it being Tennessee, I think we're the only ones going on the road, the only SEC team. Yeah, that's no longer a topic. So we can go ahead and throw that crap out right now because it's just silly. Um, Now, as far as where the fact that I think it should have been in Knoxville. I understand that these two teams, it was going to be close, and I just assumed because it's the Ohio State brand that they were going to give it to them. I mean, if you look at the resumes, um, they are very, very similar. Ohio State, their first loss came to the number one team in the country. I think it was on the road. I can't remember. I think it was in Oregon, but I can't remember. But their first loss came to the number one team in the country. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to take one more unexpected quick break. I'll be right back. All right. Hey, friends. Apologies for that. So, anyway, just getting back on topic. So, comparing the two resumes between, because that's what it's supposed to be about. Um, you know, Ohio State's good loss was against the number one team in the country. Tennessee's good loss was against the number two team in the country. And I think they were both on the road. Um, so really, I think those are, I mean, they're obviously comparable, but I think you could probably say those count for about the same, really. Go, asshole. Thank you. All right. So anyway, um, a loss at Oregon and a loss at Georgia, I think those pretty much cancel each other out. But I can understand that, that given where these teams were at the time, because Georgia was still, I don't know where they were ranked, but they weren't number two at the time when they placed Ohio State right ahead of us. They became number two after the SEC championship. Um, but those two losses, I think, were comparable, and I could understand how, given where the rankings were at that point, they might give a slight edge to Ohio State in that category. But then you look at the other loss. Tennessee lost on the road against a decent Arkansas team. Not a good team, not a bad team, a decent Arkansas team on the road in the SEC. Ohio State lost in their own building against a Michigan team in the very last game of the season when everything is on the line and all everyone's talking about is teams handling their own business. They didn't do that. And they let their biggest rival, who is having their worst year in the last several years, come into their own building and beat them. I think that's definitively a worse loss than Tennessee on the road in the SEC against Arkansas. Several weeks ago, by the way, because there is a recency. Yeah, it's not even a bias. I wouldn't call it a recency bias. There is an element of of the recency factor in this because teams generally, aren't the same team at the beginning of the year as they are at the end of the year. So that's why there was so much momentum for South Carolina. But that's another topic. So Ohio State, the time when everything's in front of them, all they've got to do is take care of their business. Tennessee did that. We did that. We screwed up in the first quarter, but then we roared back and handled Vanderbilt on the road, which even still, that's almost like a home game for us. But Ohio State in their own building against their biggest rival, who sucks this year, lost. That's a bad loss, no matter how you look at it. I don't think Tennessee has a bad loss. Arkansas would beat the brakes off of Michigan, no matter where they played. I am confident in that. And that's why I do believe that Tennessee should have been number eight and Ohio State nine. But I was not surprised at all. And it's mostly because of the brand. It's the Ohio State brand, Ohio State talent. Ohio State, everybody keeps saying, is maybe the most talented team in the country. And I'm not even arguing with that. They've spent $25 million on this roster. But we're going to get into the actual comparisons of the team as well here in a minute. But I'm just right now talking about the resume comparison. I think Tennessee's is better. I know actually don't know for a fact because Ohio State was the one team in the Big Ten that had, I think, a decent sort of strength of schedule. But a big part of that was because of Penn State, who I've said all year is overrated. Um, but I would say our strength of schedule was better. I think the losses Oregon and at Georgia pretty much cancel each other out. And so I think the comparison comes down to, is it worse to lose the last game of the season to your big rival who is a bad team this year in your own building? or to have lost to a decent Arkansas team on the road 2 months ago. I That's my argument. But again, I'm not up in arms about it. I'm not even surprised by it, but I do think this game should be in Neyland Stadium. And this is the thing I've said, you guys know all year that I've been most excited about this new playoff structure is that we're going to get college games, college home games in the postseason. We're going to get, I mean, the college home game atmosphere and meaningful postseason games this year for the first time ever. And so, I mean, everybody was thinking about, man, can you imagine Neyland Stadium getting to host a playoff game? So it's disappointing, but again, not shocking. I'm going to take another quick break and then we'll dive into some of the details of the game and the comparisons of the team. I do have a lot I wanted to get to today. I don't know that I'll have time for all of it, but we'll try. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. So I'm going to do a really just sort of superficial, on the surface analysis and comparison of these two teams, and we'll really we've got 2 weeks to dive into all the details of it. So I'm just going to do like an on the surface comparison of the two teams the way I see it right now. Um, and looking at these two teams, there are really only two areas that I can think of that I would give Ohio State the edge. So we'll go through. Um, Coaching, I think Tennessee's better. I think Josh Heupel is a better coach than Ryan Day, and I'm not a Ryan Day hater. Like I think all the hate on him is maybe over the top and unnecessary. Although I get it a lot more now than I did a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to be defending Ryan Day as much as I did after he lost another one to Michigan the way he did. Um, but I'm still not, I wouldn't consider myself a Ryan Day hater. Um, but I would say Josh Heupel is the better coach. Now, I could see an argument to be made, but I think we have the edge when it comes to coaching in game, like game planning and game management. I think we have the edge. And I think most people would probably agree. And then you look at quarterback. We definitely have the edge there. Will Howard's a good player. He's not Nico. Now, Will Howard is more experienced, and that matters. So it's not like an overwhelming difference. But I do think that we have the edge at the quarterback position. Nico can just do things that Howard can't. Um, so the experience edge, which is very relevant for a quarterback, they have that definitely. But just overall, I'm still giving the edge to our quarterback, and I think most people would agree with that as well. Um, you look at the skill position players, if you want to take them as a whole, um, that's where Ohio State has the edge. Um, our number one running back, I would say, is better than their number one running back, but they've got a stable of guys that I think is better than what we have right now. Their receivers may be the best group, probably is the best group of receivers in the country. Now, we don't have a bunch of slouches there. We've got a really good one, but I think they have the edge in that department. Offensive line, we have the edge there. That's the one thing that I think most people would say is probably Ohio State's biggest weakness right now. And while it's not, maybe it's not the best offensive line in the SEC, it is one of the better offensive lines in the SEC, which makes it one of the better offensive lines in the country for us. So we've got the edge there. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball. Um, the defensive line, they've got a really, really good one. Ours, it might be the best in the country. It's either first or second best in the country, but theirs is really good too. I mean, you're talking about probably two of the top three or four defensive lines in the country right here. That's going to be a great matchup to watch. The difference is we've got a good offensive line and they don't. So, with that, I would give us a very, very slight edge, but it's not huge. Um, with linebackers, I think they probably have the edge there, but I don't know how big of a deal that is really in the modern or excuse me, in the modern game. Um, so maybe you could just say front seven overall. That's maybe a tie. Um, and then in the secondary, that would be the other area where I give them the edge. I think they are better than us there. We have a ton of talent back there, but it's still mostly, they're more experienced, obviously, than they were to start the season. but it's still a lot of young guys. And so Ohio State has one of the better secondaries in the country. That the same can't be said for us. So that's the one area where I think I would give them a definitive edge over us. So looking at the two teams, and again, we'll dive into this in more detail. This is a very on the surface, sort of superficial analysis, but I think Tennessee has the edge in coaching. Tennessee has the edge at quarterback. Tennessee has the edge on the offensive line. Ohio State has the edge on skill position players, but Dylan Sampson, Squirrel White, Brew McCoy, they make up for a lot of that, specifically Sampson. So it's not overwhelming. But Ohio State, I do think has the edge there. Um, and then on the defensive side, I would actually get maybe say it's a tie. I, I want to give us the edge because I do think we have the best defensive line in the country, but Ohio State's is really good too. So we'll say that one's a push because these are two great defensive lines. Um, Linebackers, I don't know. I don't know about their linebackers, and ours are. They were really good, but we lost our number one guy. Arion Carter's really good. T-Lander's good. So we've got a lot of good ones. So we'll say front seven is a tie. We'll just put it all front seven is a tie. Um, and then the secondary, they have the edge. So that's a lot that we have the edge in more of these areas. Now, I know there's a lot that goes into it, a lot more than that. And, that's just, again, on the surface analysis. But then another area where they have the edge is a big one, and that's home field advantage. So now, if you're asking me, just would I take the team that has the home field advantage, the better secondary, and the better skill position players, or would I take the team that has the better coach, the better quarterback, and the better offensive line? Well, I'm going with the latter. I mean, and again, this is, I know, just on the surface, but just on the surface, I'm taking Tennessee, and I've already jumped on that. It was it's a 7 point line. I don't remember. I think the money line was plus 200 and something. I already jumped on that. I would advise. Well, I don't want to, I don't want to advise anyone to take a huge underdog, but that's what I did. I already put a good chunk of money on Tennessee to win that one, and I believe we will. And here's the other thing, and this is something that you'll hear talked about over the next few weeks, and you may have already heard it. Um, the home field advantage thing, we can take that away pretty quickly if we do to Ohio State what we did to Georgia, we will win that game because we jumped out to a 10-0 lead against Georgia. If we do that against Ohio State after they just lost to Michigan in their own building, with everybody already wanting to run Ryan Day out of town, and Tennessee comes in and jumps out to a big lead on them, that home field advantage is out the fucking window. That's done. And now, I'm not saying that we're definitely going to win at that point if we do, but I think I think we most likely win that game if we can jump out to an early lead. And that was a problem for us earlier in the season. We hadn't been able to do that there in October, but since then, we've gotten much, much better. You remember there was that stretch there where we couldn't even score in the first half of a handful of games. Um, but we've gotten a lot better since then. And I've talked about, I don't know what to do. For some reason, Nico might just not like October, but the offense has gotten much, much better since the beginning of November. And they've also gotten better at what's always been Josh Heupel's one of his biggest defining characteristics, which is jumping out on top of teams early. I mean, Josh Heupel is one of, if not the best in college football when it comes to early game scripts offensively. That's kind of what he built a reputation on for the first couple of years. Now, and that's why it was so surprising for those few games where we struggled early on. But we've gotten that on track now. And you're going to give Josh Heupel over 2 weeks to prepare and game plan for this team. You're going to give us all that time to draw up the plays, everybody to practice. And yeah, I think we are going to jump on top of them early. Um, so Would I have rather had Penn State or Indiana? Yeah, obviously. I've said all along, I think Ohio State is one of two legitimate contenders in the Big Ten. But man, my opinion on them changed a lot, as I'm sure many people's did, when I saw what Michigan did to them in their own building in a game when they were just supposed to be handling business and they were three touchdown favorites. By the way, that's another one I won on. I took the Michigan spread. I didn't think Michigan would actually win, but I thought they would keep it a lot closer than the ridiculous three touchdown line they had. Um, but anyway, excuse me, we've got a lot of time to talk about that. I'm really, really excited. Again, I feel like it should be in Neyland Stadium, but it is what it is. I was not shocked. Um, Ohio State is one of the most talented teams, if not, just purely from a talent or roster talent standpoint, maybe the best in the country. But Tennessee's got the edge in a lot of areas that matter the most. I'm excited about this one, and it's actually the that 7 point. We're a 7 point underdog. It was the lowest spread of any of the first round games. All the others were like Texas is an 11 point favorite against Clemson. The others were I think almost all double digits. So that was a little bit disappointing for playoff games, but anyway, so we got a lot more to talk about. I'm going to take a quick break and we can dive into some more stuff. Okay, friends, back again. So, I just wanted to. There were two other little topics that I had college football related that I wanted to touch on really quickly. One of them, and this has been something that I'm very interested to see, and I have been all season. I'm wondering how the new 16 or excuse me 12 team playoff is going to affect the bowl landscape and the other postseason games, which were already you know, becoming less and less important over the last few years. Um, I remember the first one, I'm sure he wasn't the first one to do it, but the first big name I remember to sit out his team's bowl game was Christian McCaffrey. And so that's been several years ago. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with this guy? How could you do that? But now we've seen it. We see it regularly. We see it, especially with guys who are considered to be, first or second round picks. We see it with a lot of quarterbacks, especially that are going to be NFL draft picks. But it's become increasingly common over the last few years. And I think Florida State last year may have set a terrible trend for or set a terrible precedent for college football because they did not make the playoffs. They should have. They ended up in still a New Year's Six bowl, but the entire team basically said we're not playing in this game. And it was ugly. It was disappointing. It made whatever that bowl game was, I can't remember which one it was, but a New Year's Six game suck. And now all the New Year's Six games are part of the playoffs. So all that's left are the second tier bowls and below. And now we're going to have even more teams that feel like Florida State did last year. I mean, do we really think Jalen Milroe is going to go play in? I don't even know what they're in. The Music City Bowl, Texas Bowl? I don't know. But no, he's not. Any Alabama players that are likely to be draft eligible are probably not going to play in whatever bowl game they're in. Neither are now. I did see surprisingly, Cam Ward said he's going to play in Miami's bowl game. That was surprising. And I think Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter might be playing in their bowl game. But those are the exceptions, and there's a reason why. Though that was news. Years ago, that's the expectation. That would not have been news before. But I got notifications. That's how I know this because I got notifications on my phone that Cam Ward's playing, and I got another one that said that Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter are probably expected to play. So that's no longer the expectation for them. People were surprised that these guys are going to play, and I think we're going to see a lot of guys sitting out from teams like Miami. Even though Cam Ward is playing, I think we're going to see a lot of guys sitting out. We're going to see a lot of Alabama players, a lot of South Carolina, Ole Miss, all these teams that were on the bubble, like Florida State was last year. and feeling like they should have gotten in and that feel nothing but disappointment right now, how are you going to get them up for the friggin' Music City Bowl or the Cheez It Bowl or what the hell, Pop Tarts Bowl, what the hell ever? How do you get them motivated for that? How do they care about that? So I've been very interested to see how this is going to shake out all along, all year, how the new 12-team playoff would affect the other bowls, which were already becoming less and less important. And now, even the, relatively good second tier bowls like the Citrus Bowl and maybe the Music City Bowl and whatever are like huge disappointments, are, at best consolation prizes. Um, so now we'll still see probably the smaller teams, playing their guys just because that's the way it goes. But for the bigger programs that had hopes of making the playoffs this year, I don't think they're going to be having many guys play in any of these bowl games. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that changes things. Because now it could become, and this could even be a good thing. And the reason I say that is because I think we might start seeing the bowl games outside of the playoffs as no longer like a close to the year for these teams, but more like a showcase for the future. That's what it was that's what it's become for a lot of teams in a lot of instances. That's what it was for us last year. We were in the Citrus Bowl last year. Joe Milton was expected to, be drafted. He sat out. And so we got to see Nico. Nobody cared that Joe Milton sat out. We wanted to see Nico. So I think now this could be an opportunity for sort of the perspective or the perception of these end of year bowl games that aren't in the playoffs to no longer be what they used to be, but now to be a showcase for what these teams might be in the future. I think that could be a good thing. Um, but that could maybe become the way you start marketing it. Now these postseason games are showcases for our young talent and what we might be going forward. But in the end, as of right now, unless that is the perspective that's taken, these bowl games are probably going to suck. And, there's going to be an imbalance too, just like there was in that New Year's Six game with Florida State when whoever they played, they didn't have their entire team sitting out. So they got walloped. The game sucked. And there's going to be that imbalance too with, guys who some teams do want to play their starters. Some teams, their players, their upperclassmen don't play. Um, but I think it really could shift to be more of like a showcase for what the team's going to look like in the future. Anyway, there was one other thing, and I was going to get into maybe the future of the playoffs as well and what the structure could be going forward. Um, because that's been a big topic, and I know Reese Davis has been a big proponent of the whole system is stupid with giving conference champions buys because these conferences are not even. And why don't you just seed the field the way the rankings are? Um, and there's a lot of merit to that, but also these conference championships are already going to be devalued. And so this was kind of a way to keep them meaningful and keep them interesting and give teams reason to play and want to play in these conference championship games. So I see the logic behind what they did, but I also see how it's not been great. I mean, to have now Boise State and Arizona State as the number 3 and 4 teams ahead of Texas, Georgia, or excuse me, ahead of Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame. I mean, do we really think any of those teams are better than the ones that? No, they're not. But that's the way it went. So, anyway, that's a whole other topic, and we'll dive into that. We got plenty of time to dive into that in the future. I'm going to take one more quick break, and we'll try to do some Titans talk. Hey, friends, welcome back. So, I'm going to tell on myself really quickly. Just because I feel like that's something that isn't done on most, media things and podcasts and radio shows and TV shows and sports stuff, but I broke my own rule. You guys know I always say never bet against the Chiefs, but I broke my own rule last night. I just had a feeling, and I really like the Chargers. I really like Justin Herbert. But now, ever since I declared them as being a legit contender, that was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. They've now lost two in a row. Um, Two good teams, but two teams that are probably actual contenders. Um, I think one was to Pittsburgh, was it last week? And then obviously against Kansas City. Or was it, I don't remember. But anyway, I know the Chargers have now lost two. And no, it was the Ravens, right? Hell, I don't remember. I think it was the Ravens. Yeah, it was. Um, but I broke my own rule there. I really liked the Chargers. I really like Justin Herbert. I really like Jim Harbaugh, and I was really hoping that that they could pull off the upset. And plus, it just felt like Kansas City. They're going to drop one of these eventually. I mean, one of these close games that they keep squeaking by on. They lost to Buffalo, but that was a team that might be actually better than them. These other games are games where they're probably the better team, but they keep just barely squeaking by, and it felt like they can't win 16 games in this fashion. But damn if they didn't do it again. Um, and got by at the ended up winning by 2 points, I think. Now, if I had just taken the spread, then I would have won because it was a 4.5 spread, and I did on one, but it was part of a parlay. I had Justin Herbert over 225 yards. Patrick Mahomes over 10 rushing yards and the Chargers plus the spread. And then, of course, Justin Herbert ends up coming 13 yards short for me, or else I would have won a good chunk on that one, but whatever. But I did break my own rule and go against my own advice, and I'm not going to do that again. Anyway, there was another game that, boy, oh boy, that I'm going to tell you, I don't know that Brian Callahan should be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans next year. Now, I'm not definitively saying that I think he should be fired, but every week for the last like 2 months now, every single week, except for the one, who did we upset? Houston. Except for that one week, I have felt it coming away from our games with less and less confidence that this guy is a decent head coach. And I've said this all along. It is very difficult for someone on the outside to assess the job of a coach. It's easy to assess players. We can see their performance on the field. But most of what goes into being a head coach is stuff we don't see. So it's much harder to assess how a coach is performing than it is any player. With that being said, and I know I've said this before and I'm repeating myself, there are some telltale signs of good or bad coaching. One is penalties, which is an indication of discipline. I think we lead the league now in either the number of penalties or penalty yards. I can't remember. I don't think it's both, but it was one of the two. We commit so many stupid penalties, pre snap penalties, third down defensive penalties. So many. More than I have seen from a Tennessee Titans team than I can remember. You sure as shit didn't see that under Mike Vrabel. You definitely didn't see that under him. And another interesting thing was they were talking about on the broadcast how um, after the loss last week, Brian Callahan kind of took a different tone with his team and was getting on guys, and they saw a different side of him. And now there was like this mentality that okay, Brian Callahan's got a little bit of an edge to him too. Man, that almost made me laugh because I remember thinking, could you imagine somebody saying some stupid shit like that about Mike Vrabel? Yeah, that was never a question before, whether or not this guy has some authority and some edge to him. Yeah, you would not have heard that same topic being discussed prior to, with the Tennessee Titans before. But anyway, I got off topic. Another telltale sign, and a lot of this comes down to discipline, hit coverage, and special teams. We've been consistently the worst in football. The only good thing about our special teams is Nick Folk. Even Ryan Stonehouse seems to not be nearly as good of a punter as he was. And maybe that's because he has to worry that every fucking kick is going to get blocked or that he's going to have to be the one to make a tackle. It's the worst special teams in the league. That is something that is an indication of coaching. Um, the fact that you get blown out multiple times when you play good teams is generally an indication of coaching. The fact that you lose the games you shouldn't lose. This was the first game we were favored in probably 2 months. And then you lose it against a division opponent who's playing with a backup quarterback and who prior to this game had won two games. And you lose that one. Now, here is the biggest thing for me, though. This is what it really, I think, the biggest thing that has made me think, okay, I don't know that this guy's going to be a good coach. How well is your team performing relative to the talent on the roster? I'm going to tell you, this is the most talented team Tennessee has had at least in the last 3 years. At least since that that second year with Tannehill and Henry when AJ Brown was still on the team and the offensive line and Taylor Lewan was still sort of able to stay healthy and um, since at least then, that year where Tannehill took over and then the year after that. And honestly, top to bottom, this team may be more talented than that one. But this is at least the most talented team we have had since then. And we've won 3 games now. And we've gotten embarrassed multiple times by getting blown out, by losing to bad teams. So, how well that was the thing that Mike Vrabel excelled at. It felt like we never had a top 10 roster, except for maybe that one little span right there where we had even a top 15 roster in the NFL throughout his tenure. Yet consistently, he won more games than were expected. That was what he excelled at, was getting the most out of the guys on the team, was being that leader of men kind of coach, and was situational football, the thing that we just absolutely suck at now. I don't know what our third down statistics are, but I guarantee you they're not good. I don't know what our red zone statistics are, but I know defensively we suck. I know offensively it's not good. The situational stuff that Mike Vrabel was one of, if not the best in the league at, we now suck at. I don't know. I don't know what you do from here. Fans of the show or longtime listeners will know I was shocked that they fired Vrabel in the first place. I was saying in the couple of weeks prior to it actually happening that there's no way that's going to happen. And these idiots out there saying it should are exactly that. I couldn't believe they fired him. Now, after the fact, I tried to convince myself that it's a good thing. And, you do what a fan does. You rationalize, you justify, you look at the positives. And Brian Callahan was not one of my top 2 or 3 favorite options for head coach in the offseason. But, he seemed like an okay one. seemed like a good option. Rand Carthon and Amy Adams were certainly convinced that he was the guy, and their confidence gave me confidence. But he was not one of my favorite choices. Um, I just I gotta say, man, right now I don't know where we go from here. Um, I gotta pee real quick though, so I'm gonna pause. All right, hey friends, back again. So I just all the indicators that I can think of that are generally signs of good or bad coaching over these last few months, couple months, and through most of the season have pointed to this guy is not a good coach. Now, do I think he should be fired after his first year? I don't know. I don't know. It depends on who else you have in mind. And that's what I've always said. That's what I've always said to these media and fans who are always so quick to say that a quarterback should be benched or a coach should be fired. Well, who are you going to get? You got to put somebody out there. It's easy to say Ohio State should fire Ryan Day. Do they know they're going to get somebody better? It's easy for us to say that Brian Callahan should be gone after 1 year, but who's out there that we want? I would still like to see, even though the offense hasn't been nearly as good this year, I'd still like to see what the Houston offensive coordinator could do as a head coach. He was one of my top three choices. Would Ben Johnson consider coming to Nashville? Because if that's the case, then yeah, run Brian Callahan the hell out of town. Could we get Mike Vrabel back? I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. Um, I don't know. Belichick? I don't know. I don't know. Um, I don't know who else we would be the option because let's face it, there are going to be, as always, a lot of openings. There, for the last several years, it seems like there have been at least five or six openings at the end of an NFL season. And ours is not going to be one of the more desirable ones, more than likely. The Bears, who wouldn't want Caleb Williams? You know, what's the selling point for us? Unless we end up with the number one pick, I don't know what the real selling point is. There's talent on the roster, but it's a weird mix of veteran talent and youth with a, a quarterback that you're still not sure about. Not a lot of salary cap space, not a ton anyway, not to where it would be a big selling point. I mean, I don't know. So, do I think Brian Callahan should be fired after 1 year? As of now, I'm still going to say no because I've generally always felt like that's too quick for any coach. I've never been a fan of teams firing a coach after 1 year unless there's a real reason to, like with Urban Meyer or something. So I'm not going to change that policy now just because it's my team. But man, I think his seat is heating up, and there's a lot more reason to think he's a that he's not a good coach than there is reason to believe that he will end up being a good one as of now. This is a roster that's, I'd say, at least top 20 in terms of talent in the NFL, and we've won 3 games. This is a team that's one of, if not the most penalized in all of football. This is a team that cannot cover kicks and that allows block punts regularly. This is a team that that loses games, the handful of games they should win. I just, boy, it's to go from the culture set by Mike Vrabel to now what's a more modern sort of mentality and sort of the the Shanahanian McVay style that's more modern, more offensive, more you would think more likable to the young players. That's a big culture difference. And so maybe it's still taking time to implement that. And maybe, you know, once we get there. And look, this is still not one of the, we still don't have a ton of talent. This is still not one of the 10 most talented rosters. So, you know, Rand Carthon, when he first came in, had a hell of a job on his hands. And we're still rebuilding and trying to repair and suffering from the mistakes of John Robinson. That's still not over. And I said that, the year we fired him, I said, this is not going to, it doesn't matter who we get. We're not going to fix this in 1 year. It's now been 2 years. So we're getting closer. It's a talented team, I would say, compared to what we had before for the last few years. But, it's not one of the most talented. So there's still, there are still questions about the quarterback, even though I've gotten more and more confident in him over the last several weeks. And I've really started to become a Will Levis fan again. But we're still not sure about him. I mean, what happens if we end up with the number one pick? Are we going to take Shador Sanders? Or are we going to, because I know for a lot of Titans fans, the memory of Marcus Mariota is not gone. We could have had Jared Goff, but we weren't going to do that because it was only Mariota's second or third year. I can't remember. And we felt like we've got our guy. And so we traded back, pretty much raped the Rams. We got a buttload in that draft or in that trade, but we still didn't have our quarterback. So that memory is still going to be in the minds of a lot of Titans fans if we end up, with the number one or number two pick and the opportunity to draft a Shador Sanders or a Cam Ward or whoever. I don't know. So we're still in a situation where I think the rest of the season continues to be about the same questions it was about before the season, and neither of them have been answered. I've said it all along. You guys have heard me say it ad nauseum. This season was all about answering two questions. Do we have the coach and do we have the quarterback? We still don't know about either one. Right now, I'm more confident in the quarterback than I am the coach. Through the first half of the season, it was the complete opposite. So I don't know, man. But all the indicators that you can usually see clearly of coaching are not looking like Brian Callahan is a good one. And Will Levis has been so much better since he got benched. And you guys heard me talk about, I think there might be something to that. Bryce Young's been better, Anthony Richardson's been better, and Will Levis. They've all three been significantly better since spending a little time on the bench this season. But anyway, we still don't know about Levis. And yeah, that's where we are. You know, with a handful of games left in the season, feels like we are no closer to answering either of those questions than we were at the beginning of the year. So there's our Titans outlook. The Vols, everything's looking good. The Titans, everything looks like crap. So anyway, I'm going to take another quick break and I'll try to think of something positive to end the show. All right, hey friends, back again. So thanks for listening today. We do have an actual one more football game this week. We've got the Monday night game between two very disappointing NFL teams. Excuse me, the Bengals are, I think, a 4.5 or 5.5 point favorite. 5.5, I think. I have a little parlay that I don't know, not super confident in, but I kind of like. That is the Bengals with the 5.5 point spread. Joe Burrow over 275 passing yards, and then over the total because these are two bad defenses. The total was like 49.5. So, I'm not saying everybody should do that one. I'm not going to push that one like I did the Oregon and Georgia stuff, but I like it. And, I've got a little bit of confidence in it. And, it's football. So we're all going to watch, even though both teams have been hugely disappointing. All right. So I hope everyone has a fantastic week. Keep checking out the YouTube channel. I know we haven't done much, in terms of new stuff on there over the last couple of weeks, but we're going to get back to that soon. Um, and oh yeah, as always, I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and I love you. Bye.